I watched a brilliant cardiologist, a man who spent decades saving others, lose 4 years of his life in just 3 minutes. He didn't die, but the man he was vanished. His wife stood just feet away, frozen, watching his memories burn out like a candle. As a surgeon, this haunts me, because stroke isn't just a medical emergency. It's a thief that steals your dignity and your past. Today, I'm showing you how to lock the door, because in the next 40 seconds, someone will lose their self. Don't let it be you. My name is Dr. Isabella Hart. For over 15 years, I've worked as a cardiothoracic surgeon. I've held human hearts in my hands. I've stood at the thin line between life and death more times than I can count. But what I'm about to tell you isn't about the surgery room. It's about the minutes before you ever get there. In my career, I've seen thousands of libraries of memories vanish. I'm talking about brilliant minds, people with decades of wisdom, suddenly erased. And here is the cold, hard reality. Every 40 seconds, another person in this country has a stroke. That is one person by the time I finish this sentence. As a physician, I look at the clock differently than you do. To me, time isn't money. Time is brain. Every single minute your brain is deprived of oxygen, you lose 2 million neurons. 2 million. In the time it takes to wait and see if it passes, tens of millions of brain cells, the cells that hold your ability to speak, to walk, to recognize your grandchildren, are simply gone. But there's something that bothers me even more than the biology of a stroke. It's the psychology of it. I see it most often in people over 60, especially those of you who have spent your lives being self-sufficient. You were raised to be strong, to be the pillars of your family, and above all, not to be a burden. In sociology, we see this often in successful, independent adults. We call it dangerous politeness. You feel a weird numbness in your arm. You feel the floor tilt beneath your feet. And your first instinct isn't to call for help. Your first instinct is to apologize. You think, I don't want to make a fuss. I don't want my children to panic over nothing. I'll just lie down for a bit and see if it clears up. I deeply respect your desire to be independent, but in the world of cardiovascular medicine, that politeness is a death trap. Research shows that the more successful and self-reliant a person is, the longer they tend to wait before calling 911. You aren't being strong by staying silent. You are being vulnerable to a tragedy that is entirely preventable. When you choose that golden silence to save face, you are actually risking the one thing you've spent your whole life building, your identity. A stroke doesn't just attack your body, it attacks who you are. I'm making this video because I don't want you to be another statistic. I want you to understand that calling for help isn't an admission of weakness. It is an act of extreme courage. It is you choosing to protect your future, your memories, and your family from a burden far greater than a false alarm phone call. So, let's stop being polite and let's start being fast. Because those 2 million neurons you're losing every minute, they don't come back. Why do people wait? I've asked hundreds of patients and their families this exact question. The answers are always the same. I thought it would pass. I didn't want to make a fuss. I wasn't sure if it was serious. But there is one answer that breaks my heart every time. I didn't want to call an ambulance and be wrong. I understand that. Especially for your generation. You were raised to be self-sufficient, to be strong, and never to be a burden to others. I deeply respect that independence. But in the case of a stroke, that self-reliance is your greatest enemy. It is a deadly defiance. The average time between someone noticing their first symptom and actually calling for help is over 30 minutes. Think about that. 30 minutes. While you are sitting there, wondering if you should bother your children or annoy the paramedics, 60 million brain cells are simply vanishing. You aren't being tough by waiting. You are being reckless with the only brain you have. Let me tell you about a patient of mine. She was a retired school teacher, 68 years old, sharp as a tack. One morning, she noticed her right hand felt a little strange, weak, a bit numb. She told herself she just slept on it awkwardly. She didn't want to be dramatic. She made breakfast. She read the paper. She even called her daughter just to chat. But she didn't mention the hand because she didn't want her to worry. An hour and 40 minutes passed before she finally realized she couldn't grip her coffee cup. By the time she reached me, the window for the best treatment had almost closed. She survived, but she never regained full use of that hand. She can't write letters to her grandkids anymore. She can't knit. All because of 100 minutes of not wanting to be a burden. Please, hear me clearly. With stroke, there is no such thing as being dramatic. There is only acting or not acting. Your children would much rather receive a false alarm call at 2 a.m. than spend the next 20 years helping you eat or dress because you waited too long. Calling for help isn't making a fuss. It is a responsible, courageous act to protect your future and your family's peace of mind. Don't let your pride steal your independence. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. Pick up the phone. It is better to be wrong and healthy than to be polite and paralyzed. Let me explain something that changed the way I think about stroke, and I believe it will change the way you think about it too. When a stroke happens, a blood vessel in your brain either bursts or gets blocked. Blood stops flowing, and brain tissue, unlike your skin or your muscles, does not recover well from losing oxygen. It starts dying within minutes, but here is the part that gives me hope. It's what we in medicine call the penumbra. Think of it like a fire in a massive library. The center of the fire is already burning. Those books are lost. But right around that damaged area, there is a zone where the books are just hot, scorched, and surrounded by smoke. They are injured, they are struggling, but they are still salvageable. In your brain, those books are your memories, your ability to speak, and your very personality. That penumbra zone can survive for a few hours, but every single minute you delay, that fire spreads. The salvageable zone shrinks. That's not a metaphor. That is neuroscience. You see, your brain is surprisingly fragile. While your muscles can go without food for days, your brain cells only have a few minutes of shelf life once the oxygen is cut off. The parts of the brain most sensitive to this are often the ones that store your language and your long-term memories. Imagine your mind as a vast archive of everything you've ever loved. The penumbra is the shelf holding the memory of your wedding day, the sound of your child's first word, and the ability to say "I love you" to your spouse. If we get to you early, we can put out the fire. We can save the books, but if you wait, those pages go blank. When I talk about the golden hour or the 3-minute decision, I'm not just talking about saving a life. I'm talking about saving a person. We have the technology to dissolve clots and physically remove blockages, but the medicine only works if there is still something left to save. You aren't just calling an ambulance to keep your heart beating. You are calling to rescue your past and protect your identity. You are making a decision to keep the library open. So when you feel that first sign of trouble, don't think about the hospital bill or the inconvenience. Think about the penumbra. Think about the memories that are currently sitting in the smoke, waiting for you to give them a breath of air. That decision to pick up the phone is the only thing that stands between a full recovery and becoming a stranger to the people you love. Now, I want to give you a practical tool, something you can remember under pressure. You might have heard of the acronym FAST, but in my 25 years of surgery, I've realized that for people over 60, FAST isn't enough. It misses too much. That's why I want you to learn the expanded version. Be fast. The B stands for balance. I'm not talking about feeling a little dizzy because you stood up too quickly. I'm talking about a sudden, unexplained loss of coordination. If the floor feels like it's tilting, or your legs simply stop cooperating, that is a red flag. The E is for eyes. This is critical. If you suddenly have double vision, blurred vision, or if you lose sight in one eye even for just a few seconds, do not ignore it. People often say, "Oh, it passed, I'm fine now." No, that was a warning shot from your brain. A bigger one might be coming. Then we have the fast you know. Face drooping, ask for a smile. Arm weakness, can you lift both? Or does one drift down? Speech difficulty, is it slurred or just strange? And finally, time. Time to call for help. But I need to add one more thing that doesn't fit the acronym, but it saves lives. The thunderclap headache. If you feel a sudden, severe pain, the worst headache of your life, like something just exploded inside your skull, that can be a hemorrhagic stroke, a burst vessel. Do not go to sleep hoping it goes away. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Maybe I should just take an aspirin and wait. As a physician, I am telling you, do not take aspirin. Here is why. Aspirin thins your blood. If your stroke is caused by a clot, it might help. But if your stroke is caused by a bleed, that thunderclap headache I just mentioned, aspirin will make the bleeding worse. It could turn a treatable emergency into a fatal one. You cannot know which type of stroke you are having until you get a CT scan at the hospital. Let the paramedics make that call. You also need to be able to tell the difference between normal aging and a stroke. If your hand feels numb, try to test your motor strength. Numbness from a pinched nerve usually changes if you move or rub it. But stroke numbness is a loss of power. If you lift your arm and it falls like a piece of dead wood, no matter how hard you try to hold it up, that is a stroke. These symptoms are silent because they don't always hurt. They just happen. But your response shouldn't be silent. It should be loud, and it should be immediate. You are not bothering anyone. You are protecting the physical engine of your soul. Now, I want to speak directly to those of you who live alone. I know the thought of having a medical emergency by yourself is terrifying, and many of my patients have admitted that their biggest fear isn't the stroke itself, it's the thought of being found too late. If you are by yourself and symptoms begin, your priority shifts. You don't have time to wait and see. You need a solo survivor protocol. Step 1. The call. Do it immediately. Do not try to call a neighbor or your children first. Call 911 or your local emergency services. If the stroke is affecting your ability to speak, do not hang up. Just say 2 words clearly if you can. Stroke and your address. If you can't speak at all, leave the line open. Dispatchers are trained to track silent calls and send help. Your silence is a message in itself. Step 2. Unlock your front door. This is a life-saving act of courage. Paramedics lose precious, irreplaceable minutes if they have to kick down a locked door. That delay can cost you 20 million brain cells. If you can still move, lout yourself to the door, unlock it, and then position yourself. Step 3. Position. Sit or lie down on the floor right there near the entrance. You want to be visible the moment they walk in. Do not lie on a high bed or a sofa. If you lose consciousness and fall, you risk a traumatic brain injury on top of the stroke. Lie on your side, the recovery position, to keep your airway clear. Do not try to drive yourself. Do not eat or drink anything. Do not take your blood pressure medication. Just focus on your breathing, slow, steady, in through the nose and out through the mouth. You are your own first responder. By unlocking that door and making that call, you are bridging the gap between an emergency and a rescue. You are not alone. You are just preparing the way for the team that is already rushing to save you.